Welcome back to In Focus Kentucky. Each week we look at one different issue impacting Kentuckians, and today we're looking at apprenticeship and opportunities that are available in the state because of it. Joining me now is Nick Wyman, CEO for the Institute for Workplace Skills and Innovation. Nick is one of the world's leaders in developing skills, building mentorship, and apprenticeship programs that close the gap between education and careers around the world. Thanks so much for joining me.
Really excited to be here.
Hey, we're excited to have you here, and let's start off by giving us a little bit of a background on yourself. How did you get involved with this whole process of apprenticeship?
Well, I actually was an apprenticeship. So my father was an academic, and like a lot of parents, he had a pathway mapped out, and he thought that four-year college was the right path for me. I was a young person who wanted to learn by doing, and sitting in a traditional classroom was not going to work for me. So I convinced my father and convinced my parents to let me enter the workforce in a different way. And that was a few years ago, and well, actually quite a few years ago now, back in the 1980s. But anyway, things have changed a little bit. But what's really happened since there is this apprenticeship movement, which I should say is the Western world's oldest form of learning, has really taken on this new life, and particularly in the US and particularly here in Kentucky.
And how are apprenticeships going around the world?
So back in my homeland, apprenticeship has always been very strong. If you look at some of the numbers involved and where the capacity lies, there's the same number of apprentices in Australia that there are in the US. But the big difference, there's only 22 million Australians. So per head of population, there's a lot more people involved in apprenticeship programs. And that's because employers are seeing the value of investing in this skilled labour pipeline. And so I think it's really this idea of being able to match the interest and the opportunities for young people and actually connect that with the jobs that are needed. And you know, one of the big flaws that we've got is that our education systems are producing people for programs and courses that are popular, but that's not actually ending in a job.
Now talk about you being from Australia, you're in Kentucky. What's the connection? How did you end up getting connected with what's going on here in our state?
Well, through the Commissioner and the Secretary, who, you know, we've been talking for a long time about what's going on in the world, and a lot of the things that are going on in Kentucky, a lot of the challenges about how to connect people from school to work, how to work with people who might be underemployed and looking for more work, how to work with people who may have been incarcerated, how to work with different groups. And as the Commissioner said, how to actually connect that with all these employers that are saying we can't find people with the skills to get the job done. So it's actually hurting their competitiveness. So by looking at all these wonderful elements that are going on here, taking some of the world's best practices. So in Australia, we've got a model which is an intermediary model, where we actually look at getting together groups or clusters of employers, small employers, and being able to offer mentored apprenticeship programs. So that's one of the things that we've been talking about, and we've been out talking to workforce boards and different people. But for the individual and for the viewers out there, what does this all mean? That's a rhetorical question. You're probably going to say, hang on, I'm asking the questions here. Right. I think that it just means opportunity is what it means for the individuals and for the businesses. And so it's a great time, and I've really enjoyed my time, you know, talking to people in the state.
And obviously you've traveling here in the United States and in Kentucky. Have you traveled across other parts of the world to learn and take in new knowledge to be able to share in your travels? Yeah,
absolutely. I should say I actually live in New York, and use that as a base to travel around the world. But you know, have spent time in the UK. The UK has also you know, had a long track record in successful apprenticeship. And I think that you know, what is really going on in Kentucky is this revival and opportunity to to look at all these programs and take the best elements and then create a model that's right for Kentucky. And there's so many things already going on the ground, but I think there's opportunity to engage more employers, more young people, and you know, looking from the outside in, you know, it's got all the key elements sitting here, right here in this state. So it's about to really take off.
Now, what industries would you say are some of the best suited for new apprentices?
Well, I think that there is quite often a misconception that apprenticeship would only be for building construction or something that might be associated with unions, and that's a fine definition to have. But apprenticeship has actually expanded beyond that now. So earlier on in the segment, you touched on healthcare. Healthcare is another area. So really, there is banking, finance, administration. Apprenticeship really can be a solution to where people can transition from school to work. They can get the skills while on the job, and of course, keeping ahead of this tsunami of technological change. And that's one thing about an apprenticeship. You're actually in the workplace and you're able to adapt to changes. So you're learning the skills for today, but also the skills for tomorrow. And that's something that quite often classroom-only education can't teach you.
Now, we touched earlier about the Kentucky's Justice to Journeyman program, being able to give people a second chance. So what are your thoughts on that opportunity?
Did someone ask you about that? Personal passion of mine. I mean, what a huge opportunity for employers to get involved in a program. And I think that this is not government's problem. This is not industry's problem. This is not a state problem. This is a problem for everybody in our community and society. How to get people engaged in meaningful work. And I think one of the challenges for employers, if there's some employers watching the program, maybe they need to just sit back and say, how can we engage people from underrepresented groups? We might have some pretty traditional ways that we've brought people into our business. If we're a bit more open-minded, that throws open this whole new talent pool of available people who could come into their businesses, because ultimately businesses are looking for competitive advantage. It's very competitive, and it's not just the state next door or states in other parts of the country. We're in this global economy. So to compete, you need to have a talented labour pipeline.
And for our viewers who want to connect with you and learn more about you and what you, the different things that you do, how do they do that?
Well, I love having conversations on Twitter. So Nicholas at Nicholas_Wyman or jobubook.com. I actually wrote a book about my journey through the US over the last 10 years and talk about some of these apprenticeship programs. So either of those ways, send me a tweet, get into the conversation. I really enjoy talking to people, so please reach out to me.
Well, we really appreciate you making time for us and talking about your journeys with this program.
Well, thank you for having me on the program today.
You bet, and of course you can also use the hashtag InFocusKY to continue the conversation on this particular topic. Now next we'll speak with a person who has participated in Kentucky's apprenticeship program. He'll tell you his story and how this program is helpful to former inmates looking for a second chance. Stick with us. You're watching In Focus Kentucky.